Kia ora and welcome back to Whakarongo, the podcast representing the voices of thousands of rangatahi in state care. My name is Sydney Ann, and after marching to Parliament last year calling on the government to uphold 6 promises relating to our basic rights, this year we're talking to the young people affected by those promises being broken. The 5th is a promise made to Kai Hoffman.
You promised to take care of me.
Kai had a tough start to life with violent caregivers who left him without the skills he needed to flourish. He wasn't given access to the care he deserved and has bravely agreed to come on the podcast to talk about his experience. Kia ora Kai, firstly ka pai on sharing your story with us. I wanted to start off by asking you about your early years and what that was like.
So I first entered care at the age of 8 months old. I don't remember much from when I first went into care, as there was a bit of a custody battle between my biological grandparents, my mother, and the caregivers that I was with for a period of 8 years. So during that time, I was between the ages of 8 months to 4 years old. I was bounced around through at least a minimum of 15 different placements.
Oh, in 3 and a bit years? Wow. And then from 4 until 8?
From the age of 4 up till the age of roughly around 10, I was placed in Hamilton with caregivers that often set me aside and primarily focused on their own children.
From 10 up until you aged down?
Between the age of 10 to 11, I finally realized that nobody else was going to stick up for me. Nobody else was going to help me. So I decided to help myself. During that time, I grew incredibly violent, uncontrolled and unchecked anger until eventually I woke up one morning just full of rage and hatred. And at that moment, I snapped and just went on a bit of a destruction spree around the house.
How old were you?
I was around 10 and a half, and that is the incident that sent me to the residential system.
All right, and then from there you were in residential care?
Aye.
Until you turned 18, would it have been?
So my time in the residence in Ipuni wasn't pleasant. So I was shifted down there at roughly 11. For my first stint, I was there for about 8 months before I was then moved out to Huntley. Once again, my anger was unchecked. I lost my cool and therefore was sent back to Ipuni. The second time there, I was in Ipuni for about a month and 2 weeks. I don't remember much about the placement after that, but I believe I was sent back up to Hamilton to live in a family home for a while. Once again, my anger went unchecked and uncontrolled due to me not having proper access to the resources I needed to get help and help myself become a better person. During that time, I was often pushed around and physically assaulted by some of the other youth at the group home until I snapped once more. This time I was sent back to Ipuni for a total of 2 years, by which point I was 15. Due to a various few threats that I had made over that time period, I had repeatedly told multiple social workers, if I'm not out by the age of 16, someone will perish. During my time in Ipuni, I was pretty much used as a play toy for the other youth to just bully, punch, toss around as they so pleased. There was a group of about 4 staff members who often worked together in shifts. I still hate them with a passion, but bygones be bygones. That's in the past. Yeah. There was only a small number 2 to 3 of the staff at the residence of whom I believe actually cared about their work. For to them, it wasn't just work, it was their passion.
Man, there's so much to unpack in your story, because we're talking about the promise to be taken care of and be given the things you need. And like, it just doesn't sound like you had much of that. And your instability in placements, like, you know, the lack of being given the counseling or the support you needed with your anger or mental health issues. When you think about your care experience, what sticks out to you as like how you were treated by the care system?
Lack of attention to each young person's, or more so rather, my needs.
Yeah.
I myself am both autistic and have ADHD. Those were both traits that were written off as just anger issues, when rather it was me trying to reach out for help in the only way that I knew how.
Yeah. In your experience, in your journey, like what did you need from people around you that you just didn't get?
So for me, I needed someone who was empathetic, relatable, but also in a way slightly contradicting and challenging. My intelligence was often viewed as dangerous,
Right.
when in reality what I needed was someone to challenge it,
Yeah.
give me something to work against, instead of just having a debris field out in front of me.
So you needed someone who was like loving, caring,
But also
but
tough
also
and
tough
challenging.
love. Yeah. What would you say you got instead?
Razor blades.
So it's like really tough.
There's a saying, iron sharpens iron, brother sharpens brother.
Oh, so like peers can help each other.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, you needed that.
Connection.
Did you have any connection with people when you were growing up?
I still hold 1 or 2 of them from those couple of years ago, but I am a lot more wary,
Yeah.
as I have gained a lot of experience and knowledge on how to spot what are called red flags.
You had a ton of placements, you said, before the age of, was it 4? When you're little. To form connections, like that's a really pivotal time in your brain development when you're a baby. And to not have a stable place and be taken care of by a stable caregiver, and then to switch into now you're being moved and no one's really taking into consideration your voice and meaning like your anger or your actions as your voice when you're a kid. That to me just is like red flag after red flag after red flag on like how to make a child unable to make long-term meaningful connections with another person.
That is where self-sabotage comes into play.
Yeah.
So I purposely ruined quite a few good relationships that I had with some people because I was subconsciously afraid of them rejecting me.
Yeah.
Therefore, I rejected them before they could do that.
That's so common. As I like, we'd rather be the ones to leave than
Be
leave me.
left.
Yeah, than be left. Because how many times have we been told, oh, we're getting rid of you, or you're moving, or whatever. So I'd rather be naughty and make the choice because you don't have any choice otherwise. So self-sabotage is so common and really hard to get out of that pattern of behavior. So really stoked that you're working on it. So you are now just recently 20 and living independently. Do you think you were like given the tools or the skills that you need to function in an adult world?
Not particularly. I wasn't exactly handed everything on a silver spoon.
Yeah.
I had to forge a spoon out of rusted metal.
So you've had to like figure things out by yourself.
Sure have.
So you're flatting at the moment? Right. So being like the struggles of flatting when you're a young adult anyway, but tell me a little bit about like the struggles you faced in your journey.
One of the things that I definitely do not know how to do is how to cook.
So no one taught you when you were a kid?
Not particularly, although I can, however, make a pretty good steak. I have a secret recipe.
But don't you just put a steak on like a stovetop and then let it cook itself?
Oh,
I only ask because I don't really know how to make steak. Like in a puni, how were you fed?
in Ipuni, there was one chef and there was one cook.
Okay, so someone's cooking for you.
But
But you weren't like involved in the cooking process and teach
no,
you?
we weren't taught. We weren't brought into the kitchen as there were
Knives.
dangerous objects.
just remembered knives and young people.
Yes, that is a bad mix.
So you're sent out into the world
Sent out into the wild.
into the wild. It feels like that when you leave care. You don't really know how to cook. What else did you not know that you were not taught or given before you left care?
Good question. One of the things that I was not taught was key communication. So I had to pick that up via mimicry. A lot of what I know in terms of social cues, I had to learn via mimicry, watching others in society, how they behaved, how they acted.
I know with autism, like that is also makes it an added challenge. Does that mean that you just weren't helped in your autism when you were in care?
I was only diagnosed with autism around the age of 16. So during that time, my ADHD and autism were battling each other.
Yeah.
To have autism or ADHD in itself is a challenge enough. But when they are within the same brain, it can pose a variety of different challenges. The ADHD, more often than not, usually signals impulsivity. The autism is often about ordered structure. So having things neatly arranged in a bookshelf, whereas with ADHD, it's clothes all over the floor.
But you weren't given any like tips or tricks to combat that when you were independent, right?
No, I was not.
I'm just thinking about like the struggle that like I went through when I was becoming independent from the care system with just ADHD. But I just am like, how did you function? Like, how did you survive? Like, what was that like in those first like few years?
To summarize it, lights were on, but no one was home. I went through on a daily basis, not really doing much. The only time that I was really home was when I was out of the house or I was in a tree, just reading peacefully.
Yeah, so that was like your safe space. Looking back on your whole journey, who made a difference for you? Like, what was it that has helped you to feel like there is a better way, or that there is hope for you, that you are loved and that you do have connection to people?
There is one, or rather three, that I can memorize. One of them was one of the staff at Pathways who taught me the value of craftsmanship and the value of hard working. For the sake of anonymity, we're going to call him Greg.
Okay.
Greg often worked with me in terms of getting out and about and getting my hands dirty with all sorts of things. The third person is the groundskeeper at my school.
Oh, yeah.
The groundskeeper at my school, he taught me about philosophy. He taught me how to think deeply and critically. Taught me that patience is the key. From that, I've come up with my own quote, if I may.
Yeah, quote us.
Time is told not by phones, watches, or clocks. It is told by the stars. All you need to do is look up.
Bro, you're so deep. I love though that you've got these people that are like little beacons of hope. I wish that you'd had more of that, or that you'd had like that throughout your whole time in care, not just like one or two people. So something that we've talked about in the past is like in that struggle to transition into adulthood, a lot of the homeless population in New Zealand actually come from care experience. What would you say in your own experience are things that the general public maybe doesn't know about why a care experienced young person may find it hard?
why they would find it hard.
Yeah, to like transition into adulthood and then be a successful adult, like living alone, feeding themselves, paying bills, like all of those things that a lot of people just take for granted as like easy.
For most of the general populace, it is easy because they are told these things by their parents.
Yeah.
For these young people, they are often removed and ostracized from their family and their iwi.
Well, who's going to teach you, right, if you're moving heaps? And
being moved around is unstable, and they're not given a chance to ground themselves and properly learn. Everyone is different within their own aspects. I learn by doing things hands-on, whereas you, per se, might learn by sitting at a computer reading.
Yeah, there's lots of different learn.
Lack of materials is one of the biggest problems.
Like caregivers not having resources.
Resources, time and training, as well as proper vetting or being able to show understanding. Quite a few people think that some caregivers who already have their own children think, oh, they already have their own kids. The young person will be fine placed in their care.
Yeah.
Growing up myself, I was placed with caregivers that had their own children. I was placed on the sideline and often left to my own devices.
Well, also to be like in a family home where there are biological children, like I had that experience a few times. And I don't know about you, but for me, it made me feel like I wasn't good enough to like, why do these kids get their parents loving them? And it led me in my brain to be like, if I'm just good enough,
then I will be noticed.
Yeah, or loved. And so that then is like an extra blow when, oh, now we're moving you. It would be like, oh, well, I wasn't good enough this time, or I wasn't worth loving this time. Did you ever feel like?
Yep.
It's so hard, hey, to like.
I felt like that all the time.
Yeah. Do you know now that you are worthy of love?
Even now, I still doubt myself.
Yeah.
I doubt my capabilities.
Yeah.
I overthink things, which some people would view that as a blessing to think things through thoroughly, but it can be a curse.
Yeah. Yeah, but I hope that you are in a space where you recognize that when you're overthinking, it's your self-doubt talking, not the truth.
No, I just let them go chaotic.
Oh, no.
To put it bluntly, the inside of my head is a mixture of nuclear bombs going off and a literal poop storm.
Oh, wow. Literal poop storm. Given the fact that you maybe weren't given everything that you needed, you weren't taken care of the way you should have, what does Kai's future look like now?
My future looks like one where I am able to provide medical assistance within the armed forces.
Cool. So that's your dream?
Yep.
Kai did offer to do bathroom surgery to us earlier, so he's got the mind for it. Any military in particular, or?
Well, somebody has opened up my eyes to the Navy as a potential future.
So medic in the Navy.
Yep.
That'd be
Given
so
the opportunity to travel.
Yep.
Although, in order of careers that I'm hoping to choose in the armed forces is either medic, engineer, or the one that has all the fun blowing things sky high.
Okay, wow. I love that. Thank you so much, Kai. I'm really excited to watch your future unravel, and I'm really grateful for you sharing your korero with me today. Youth worker and advocate Aaron Hendry is doing everything he can to provide the care that many young people don't get in their placements. He helped establish New Zealand's first crisis intervention housing project for young people called KickBack, and is also a member of youth homelessness collective Manaaki Rangatahi. With nearly half of Auckland's homeless count in 2019 made up of people who had been in care or spent time in a group home, it's an organisation that's sorely needed.
Manaaki Rangatahi is a collective of organisations that are organising around how to prevent and end youth homelessness. Basically it started as a group of organisations that were like, hey, this is an issue. We're serving young people with experiences of homelessness, and there's just not enough tension on this issue. How do we work together to both solve what issues we can in our local community, but also start advocating to government to do something about this, because youth homelessness has been this big issue that has been experienced by our young people for generations, and we've never really dealt with it, and it's really time to do something. So that's Manaaki Rangatahi, an amazing sort of movement. KickBack is organisation my wife and I started last year. It's a youth development organisation that's responding to youth homelessness, and we look at how can we drive some innovation. Where are some gaps for our young people, and how do we sort of build some services that really respond to those needs. And right now we are building this project called The Front Door, which will be, a central space for young people to know that, hey, if you're experiencing homelessness, you're at risk of homelessness, you can go there and we'll have the supports and services you need, there and available to you.
Oh, cool. So they can go and get support finding a place to sleep.
The big dream is right now we have this crazy system where if you're 16 or 17, 18, whatever, and you experience homelessness, you get shoved into this motel by yourself. And often just the trauma and the harm that happens because of that is immense. Our big dream is to really redesign that whole system. And so the Front Doors, the hub is kind of the first step, but the big goal is to have, a 24/7 facility where you have, accommodation on site and, healthcare, mental health support, everything that a young person needs in one place. If you turn up at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m., you get a place to stay, and we can start working with you to get you to where you need to go. So the first step's the hub, and it's about having all those spaces in one location so that, if you are in crisis and you need support, at least there's a place you can go and we can work with you.
Significant portion of our people out on the streets have been experiencing care, or lack of care, I guess. So how would you see what would you see a future look like where we're reducing that pipeline of foster care to homelessness?
Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, right? Because there's different points where young people, where we could intervene, which could be preventing that long-term experience of homelessness for our tamariki and rangatahi. Part of that is, at that moment of uplift, right? So a lot of rangatahi tell us that, when you ask them, how often have you experienced homelessness? How long has this been going on for you? They'll tell you their whole lives. They got uplifted as a child. They moved from home to home to home. They, developed often quite high trauma, and they never found some place to stay. By the time they got 13, 14, 15, it was really hard to get a foster home. And then they're shoved into these motels, and then they live this really transient life until they're kind of come out the other end. And so there's a real need to ensure that we're creating that stability from the get-go. And, a recognition that if you're taking a young person out of their whānau, whatever that reason is, if it's, that's traumatic and that's harmful. And we need to ensure that those people that are going to care for those kids are really equipped to do a long journey with them,
Oh, so true.
That looks like, so they don't fall through the cracks. And then when we get to that older period where those children are growing up and they're becoming, tweens and teenagers, we actually have, whether it's services or whānau or support mechanisms in place to ensure that they're not being put into these motels and they're actually being able to get some stability and find some healing, because that's really, really vital. And if we don't intervene there, then, we're already seeing the result, right? In terms of young people on our streets and hotels and, long-term experiencing housing insecurity. Another point of intervention, it's a bit further down the track, but, there's real need for youth-specific housing services that meet the needs of a diverse group of young people, and we don't have enough. I think, the last count I heard, and it might have grown since then, was around 150 housing projects for young people across the country that were transitioning out of care. And when we look at the numbers, young people transitioning out of care.
It doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. 1 in 10 young people transitioning out of care or the justice system, the youth justice system, are experiencing some sort of housing insecurity.
Yeah.
We just do not have the services in place. We don't have the community support in place to really adequately care for those young people and ensure that they have the housing and support that they need.
Because just thinking about it, when you leave care, I was lucky enough when I left care, I kind of stayed a little bit longer, and I know that now we have ETRR, entitlement to return or remain in care. So young people can stay in care for a lot longer. But I noticed that not a lot of caregivers, or in my experience, some caregivers are like, oh, it's a temporary arrangement. But at what age do kids stop needing parents or parental guidance? And when they've been in care, when you've been in care, often, like, you may not have contact with your whānau anymore. You may not have a healthy relationship or a supportive relationship with your whānau anymore, or your caregivers may not want to keep you. Like, I know that I'm living life with no caregivers or caregiver interactions now, and I just feel like when you're going from like being in care to being an adult looking after yourself, that's a really hard transition anyway. And then to suddenly pull the rug out and be like, oh, and now you've not got any like caregivers or parental guidance. I feel like there needs to be more long-term caregivers who are like, hey, you might be 40 and you were in care back when you were a teenager, but I'm still your parent or still your caregiver, because I just don't understand like how as a society, or like not everyone agrees with this, but like I don't understand how we're okay with just letting our kids in care suddenly grow up and not need parents at 18 or 24 or however old. Yeah,
and then when you think about, you know, some of our young people that have had it really rough and never had a stable foster home, a stable whānau through that journey, and there is no one to return to because there's no one there. And then you're thinking, well, services have to plug those gaps. Well, you know, we need to stop thinking about service delivery and more about community development, right? Because those young people need a longer term journey. They need whānau community around them. And often services are only there for a short period of time. And so even with our housing services, you know, the youth housing services, I was a part of designing and developing some of those initial sort of supported living housing services for young people as they transition out of care. And one of the things we were continuing talking about, and I think it's still a challenge, is, well, you know, what happens when this young person comes into your service and they move out after 2 or 3 years into stable housing, and then things, you know, fall down, and you know, where do you go? Because now the housing service they came from is actually overwhelmed with the next need. But, you know, this happens in real life all the time. Teenagers move out of home and they go to the flat and it's really great, and then it falls down and they go back home to mum and dad, and that's cool. Or uncle and auntie, or there's someone there. It's so even my peers, like I'm a little bit older now, but a lot of my friends that I know, like they might, even if they're not in financial crisis, but they want to go save for a house, they'll just move back in with their parents for a couple of years and save money. Or things do go wrong. Maybe they were traveling and, oops, I've run out of money. Oh, mum and dad will fix it. Or lived in an awful flat and needed to move quickly because suddenly it wasn't safe. Mum and dad or whoever it is. But like, I don't have that option. A lot like kids who have grown up in care, we don't have that option. And so for me now that I'm older, I'm in a privileged position where I can save money and I have a security blanket, but I'm always super aware that if I don't have that financial blanket of like, if I lose my job, don't fire me, but like if I was to lose my job and then like I didn't have my savings and I couldn't find a job quickly, I'm renting. So suddenly I'd be gone. Like I don't have anywhere, like I could maybe crash at people's houses for a few weeks, you know, I could outstay my welcome at all of my friends' houses. But when you've been in care, it does feel a little bit like you're always at risk of just one or two things going wrong and being homeless. I feel like that's something I wish that the public knew about our young people who've left care, is that the risk for experiencing homelessness is so great. What do you wish the general public knew about people who are experiencing homelessness? Like, what are misconceptions that the public may have? One, they didn't do it themselves. You know, like how often people blame young people for being victims of a system that they had no hand in creating. When you sit down and hear their stories and understand what led to the experience of homelessness, often it started when they were a baby or a child and they never had a hand of saying that. Two, that there is so much harm that is happening in our society because of this issue. Like kids are being traumatized, they're being harmed, they're being abused. the opportunity to just, get a job or to do something that's really meaningful or to get connected to education and outcomes and opportunities just isn't there when you're just trying to survive. Yeah. And there's this expectation on young people that, they must be doing these things that society expects of them. But, as a young man said to me just recently, it's a lot of work to experience homelessness.
Yeah.
You were just trying to survive every single day. Every single day you're trying to think, am I going to get kicked out of this hotel? Or, I'm sleeping on the street tonight. Where am I going to be? How am I going to make sure I've got food tonight?
Where do you go to the toilet?
For myself to just get my healthcare needs bed. It's a constant state of fight and flight.
Yeah.
And how can you expect these young people to, be able to get meaningful employment or to have hopes, dreams and aspirations, which they have, but to actually live those and to actually be connected to those opportunities? The judgment and stigma that we have against young people when we have built systems that have really failed them, that actively hurt them, it's hypocritical.
I remember being, I'd have been 13 or 14 just before I went into care, and I slept in a tree house. Or I tried to sleep the whole night. I got too scared and went home. But for me, it was safer being out on the streets than it was being at home. And I think that's for a lot of our young people, if they're in unsafe placements, and they don't have to be in care, it could be their home of origin, right? But I just think there's so many things that contribute to our young people experiencing homelessness. I just remember when I was leaving care, the age of aging out was 17. Mm-hmm. And so there was, and I know it's been fixed now, but there was a huge issue with all these kids aging out at 17, but not being old enough to sign leases. Yeah. And so you couldn't even flat somewhere. And so you had a huge generation of people becoming homeless because of that. And you could almost guarantee that there will still be people experiencing homelessness who were made homeless due to that issue from when I was that age.
So when I was, really getting deeply involved in this mahi around 2018, it was around the time where they were transitioning into extending, the responsibility of care for young people up to up to 21, and then you get support up to 25, right? So they're changing that, sort of fixing that gap. But we had huge groups of young people sleeping rough in Henderson and Central Auckland and South Auckland, communities of young people that have come from the care system and had nowhere else to go, and so literally sleeping out on the streets. Now there's been some changes and there's been some more support, and there's more housing services that exist. But there's now this huge issue where we get a lot of young people being transitioned into emergency hotels, where they're now living in these hotels, and that's still an experience of homelessness, and there's still significant trauma and harm, and it's very transient. You might stay in a hotel for 7 days or 14 days, and then you're moving to the next place, and the environments are not conducive to healing or thriving, and so we still haven't really significantly dealt with the issue.
I'm just thinking of all the the young people who might be listening or watching, and they may be experiencing homelessness or be at risk of experiencing homelessness. With your work with Manaki Rangatahi and KickBack, what advice, practical advice, would you have for them right now?
One, find an adult that you trust, or a youth organisation that you trust, and share what's going on. I know that a lot of our young people are scared to tell people what's going on for them, and we call youth homelessness hidden homelessness, right? Because often our rangatahi are really, really resourceful, and you're really good at looking after yourself and getting by. But there are, it's limited, but there are supports, there are services, there are organisations that you can get hooked into, and it's not going to be perfect. We need a lot more. But if you can find someone you trust, share what's going on, then maybe you can start a journey towards getting the support that you need. I think also I want you to know that this is not your fault, that this thing that's happened to you, what you've gone through, and you are worthy of a safe place to live and a good community around you. And just because you have had probably some really horrific experiences with people that said they were going to help you and they hurt you, that there are some people out there that really do care about you, love you, and they're going to be there for you. And it takes a lot of courage and risk, and acknowledge that, but those people are out there.
If you're experiencing homelessness and need help, or want to talk to someone about your options, head to the VOYCE website to find our list of resources, www.voyce.org.nz. Remember, there's no shame in asking for help. Next week on Whakarongo, we talk to another care experience rangatahi, Isabella Kenny, about the promise of inclusion around decisions made about her. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and be a part of a movement that advocates for change, one story at a time.